The mansion did not welcome people, it swallowed them. Zuri Bennett stood at the towering iron gates, her suitcase resting beside her feet as the wind pushed gently against her braided hair. Everything about the place felt untouched by warmth. The building rose like a monument to silence, its glass windows reflecting nothing but gray skies and secrets. When the gates finally opened, she stepped inside, not knowing she was crossing into a life that would never remain ordinary again. Inside, the staff moved with quiet precision, avoiding eye contact as if emotions were forbidden currency. Whispers followed her name, but no one dared explain the man she now worked for. Eun-woo Kang. He was not introduced with warmth or kindness, only warning. When Zuri was finally escorted into the main hall, she saw him for the first time. He stood near the window, dressed in dark tailored clothing, still as if time itself hesitated around him. His presence was heavy, controlled, unreadable. Yet there was something in the way he stared outside, something that did not belong to power but to loneliness. He turned slightly. Their eyes met. It lasted only a moment, but it felt longer than silence itself. "You're late," he said coldly, though his voice carried no anger, only emptiness. "I wasn't aware I was expected to arrive earlier, sir," Zuri replied calmly. Pause. That was the first crack in his controlled world. Not defiance. Not fear. Just calmness where he expected submission. Without another word, he turned away, leaving her standing in the echo of his silence. But as Zuri was guided to her quarters, she noticed something unsettling. Eun-woo Kang had looked at her twice. And men like him did not look at anyone twice, unless something had already begun to change. If silence had a ruler, Eun-woo Kang would have been its king. By morning, Zuri learned that the mansion was not just quiet, it was controlled. Every movement had timing. Every voice had permission. Even the air felt like it belonged to someone who never allowed disorder. A staff supervisor handed her a folded list without explanation. On it were rules written in strict black ink. No unnecessary conversation. No wandering beyond assigned spaces. No emotional familiarity with the household head. Zuri read it once, then folded it carefully and placed it in her pocket. She did not argue. She did not question. She simply nodded. That calm acceptance unsettled more people than rebellion would have. From the upper floor balcony, Eun-woo watched her work through the reflection of glass he pretended not to notice. She moved differently from the others. No panic, no hesitation, no fear in her posture. Just steady purpose. It irritated him in a way he could not name. "New maid is efficient," one of his assistants said cautiously beside him. Eun-woo didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on Zuri as she adjusted curtains with quiet precision. "Efficiency is not what I asked for," he finally said. And yet he continued watching. Downstairs, Zuri felt it, an unseen pressure like being observed from somewhere she could not locate. She turned slightly but saw nothing. Still she knew. He was there. Later that evening, he passed her in the corridor for the first time since morning. The space between them was narrow enough to feel intentional, yet he did not acknowledge her presence. But Zuri noticed something strange. His pace slowed, just slightly, as he passed her. Not enough for others to notice, but enough for her to feel it. And in a house built on rules, even the smallest deviation felt dangerous. Especially when it came from the man who created them. The first crack in a fortress is never loud. It is quiet. Almost invisible. Like something inside deciding it can no longer stay whole. That evening, the mansion changed its atmosphere without warning. Eun-woo Kang returned earlier than usual, and the entire household adjusted to his silence like a storm approaching without thunder. Zuri noticed it immediately. The staff moved faster. Voices dropped lower. Doors closed softer. Even footsteps seemed apologetic. He went straight to his private study and did not come out for hours. But silence in that house was never empty. It carried weight. Zuri was in the kitchen when she heard it, a glass breaking somewhere upstairs, sharp enough to slice through the stillness. No one reacted. No one dared. Except her. She stood still for a moment, then quietly placed the cloth she was holding down and followed the sound. At the top of the stairs, she hesitated. The door to the study was slightly open. Inside, Eun-woo stood near his desk, one hand pressed against the table, the other clenched at his side. Papers were scattered across the floor like something had been thrown in frustration. But it wasn't anger that filled the room. It was exhaustion. For the first time, Zuri saw him without control. Not the boss. Not the name whispered in fear. Just a man standing under invisible pressure that even wealth could not erase. He didn't notice her immediately. And that small moment was enough for her to speak gently. "Sir." Should I bring water? The question was simple. Ordinary. Human. He froze. Slowly he turned his head. Their eyes met again, but this time, something was different. His expression did not harden immediately. It flickered, like he was unsure which version of himself to become. I didn't call you, he said quietly. I know, Zuri replied. But you looked like you needed it anyway. Silence followed. This time it was not his weapon. It was hesitation. For the first time Eun Kong did not order her away. And that terrified him more than anger ever could. Some moments change a house without warning. It happened in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. One of those rare times when the mansion felt almost calm, like it was pretending to be something softer than what it was. Zuri was finishing her cleaning duties along the polished hallway near the grand staircase. The marble floor had just been wiped, still faintly reflective, still dangerous in its perfection. She stepped back carefully, but the edge of the step betrayed her. Her foot slipped. The world tilted for a split second. Before she could fully fall, strong arms caught her. Everything stopped. Zuri blinked, stunned, realizing she was no longer touching the ground. She was in his arms. Eun Kong. He had moved faster than thought itself. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The mansion around them continued its quiet existence, but in that narrow space between breath and heartbeat, everything else disappeared. You're clumsy, he said flatly, but his grip did not loosen. I'm fine, Zuri replied quickly, though her pulse disagreed. He looked down at her ankle. A slight strain, nothing dramatic, but enough to justify his silence turning sharper. Without asking, he carried her. Zuri stiffened immediately. Sir, I can walk. You're already in my arms, he interrupted calmly. Stop arguing with physics. That was not kindness. Not exactly. But it was something. The journey to her room felt longer than necessary. Not because the distance changed, but because she was suddenly aware of everything. The firmness of his hold. The steadiness of his breathing. The strange contradiction of a man feared by many, now holding her as if she were something fragile he hadn't intended to break. When he finally set her down, he didn't leave immediately. He stood there, watching her, as if unsure why he had bothered to stop at all. You should be more careful, he said at last. Zuri nodded slowly. I will. But neither of them moved for a few seconds. And in that pause, something unspoken settled between them. A closeness neither of them had permission to name yet. The house did not change, but something inside it began to shift. Eun Kong did not announce concern. He did not offer kindness in words. But Zuri started noticing things that did not fit his reputation. Her meals arrived warmer than before. Her work schedule was quietly adjusted. And once, when she reached for a heavy bucket in the hallway, it had already been moved before she touched it. No explanation. Only silence acting differently around her. Zuri didn't question it aloud, but she felt it. The change was subtle, like a door slightly unlatched in a room that had always been locked. That night, she stayed up late finishing small chores in the kitchen. The mansion was quiet in a way that felt deeper than sleep. It felt like everything was holding its breath. She thought she was alone. Until she noticed a shadow near the doorway. Eun stood there. The storm arrived without warning. By evening, the sky over Seoul had turned heavy and restless, as if it had been holding in emotion too long. Rain began softly at first, then grew louder, beating against the mansion's glass like something desperate to be heard. The power flickered once. Then everything went dark. Zuri paused in the hallway holding a small lantern. The mansion that once felt like a fortress now felt unfamiliar in the absence of light. Shadows stretched longer, corners deepened, and silence became almost alive. She took a careful step forward. That was when she saw him. Eun Kong stood alone in the wide corridor near the staircase, unmoving. No staff nearby. No voice giving him direction. Just him and the darkness. He didn't react when she approached. Not immediately. But she noticed it. His stillness wasn't calm. It was tension held too tightly. You should sit somewhere with light, Zuri said gently. No answer. The rain struck harder outside. For a moment she thought he hadn't heard her. Then he spoke quietly. Darkness is not the problem. Zuri waited. Silence stretched between them, heavier than usual. Without thinking too long, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. It was not planned. It was not careful. It was instinct. Eun froze instantly. His entire body went rigid, as if the world had shifted in a way he could not calculate. Zuri almost pulled back. But then, slowly, his arms moved. Not fast. Not certain. But real. He returned the hug. For the first time he did not control the distance between them. The storm outside continued. But inside that moment something in him stopped running. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Because in that silence the most dangerous thing had already happened. Comfort had entered a place built for loneliness. After the storm the mansion felt different. Not louder. Not warmer. Just changed in ways no one could explain. Eun Kong returned to his usual routines the next morning, but something about him had shifted. He no longer passed through the halls with the same detachment. His gaze lingered longer than necessary, especially when Zuri was nearby. And Zuri noticed. She just didn't understand it yet. That afternoon a visitor arrived. A business associate, polished, confident, and far too comfortable in a place that belonged to someone like Eun. He spoke freely, laughed easily, and did something no one else in the mansion dared to do. He spoke to Zuri directly. "You must be new here," the man said with a friendly smile. "It's rare to see someone like you in this place." Zuri responded politely, keeping her tone respectful but distant. "I'm only here to work, sir." The man chuckled. "Still, it must be lonely." From across the room, Eun stood perfectly still. He said nothing. But the air around him changed. Zuri felt it first, that strange pressure again, like being watched more intensely than before. When she glanced toward him, his expression was unreadable. Calm. Controlled. But his silence was heavier than words. The visitor continued talking, unaware of the shift. "If you ever need better opportunities outside this place, I could leave." The word cut through the room instantly. Not loud. Final. The visitor blinked. "Excuse me?" Eun didn't move from his position. His eyes stayed fixed forward, not even directly at the man anymore. "Leave," he repeated. "Now." No explanation followed. No anger displayed. Just a quiet command that made resistance impossible. The man left shortly after, confused and slightly embarrassed. Zuri stood still, watching Eun carefully. Something inside her told her this wasn't just about authority. It was something else. Later that night she found him in the study again. Alone. As always. But this time the silence felt sharper. "You didn't like him," Zuri said softly from the doorway. Eun didn't look up. "That's not relevant." Pause. Then Zuri added carefully, "It felt like it was." That made him stop. For a moment he didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice was lower. "Some things don't need to be spoken to be real." And then he went silent again. But this time, Zuri understood something she hadn't before. His silence wasn't empty anymore. It was protective. Possessive in a way he refused to name. And that was more dangerous than words. There are truths that feel too heavy to be spoken out loud. Eun Kong learned that early in life. And Zuri Bennett was becoming one of them. Days passed after the visitor left, but the mansion did not return to its old version of silence. Something lingered in the air, something unspoken, stretched thin between distance and closeness. Eun avoided unnecessary conversation more than before, yet his presence seemed closer. Not physically, but in the way his attention always seemed aware of where Zuri was. It was subtle, but impossible to ignore. Zuri, however, began noticing something else. He was pulling away. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just small steps backward in moments that used to feel closer. One evening, she found him in the private lounge near the window. Rain tapped lightly against the glass again, softer than the storm before. He stood with his hands in his pockets, staring outside as if searching for something he couldn't find. "You've been avoiding me," Zuri said gently. Pause. "I've been busy," he replied. It wasn't true. And they both knew it. Zuri stepped a little closer. "That's not the reason." Eun exhaled slowly, almost like he was tired of holding something in place. "You don't understand what you're involved in." "I understand enough," she said. That made him turn slightly. Not fully. Just enough for her to see his expression tighten. "You shouldn't stay here longer than necessary," he said. Zuri didn't respond immediately. Then she asked softly, "Is that what you want, or what you think I deserve?" Silence. A long one. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not coldness. Not control. Conflict. Like words were forming behind his teeth but refusing to come out. He took a step closer, then stopped himself. "That doesn't matter," he said finally. But his voice was lower now. Less certain. Zuri looked at him carefully. "It feels like it does." Eun jaw tightened. For a brief second it looked like he might finally say it. Whatever it was he had been holding back since the storm. Whatever had changed since she first stepped into his house. But instead he turned away. If you stay too close to me, he said quietly, you'll regret it. Zuri didn't move. Neither did he. Because both of them understood. That wasn't a warning. It was a confession he didn't know how to complete. Danger does not always announce itself with noise. Sometimes, it arrives through silence that feels too controlled. That morning the mansion felt unusually tense. Unwoo left earlier than usual, giving no explanation. The staff moved with sharper urgency, whispering in corners before quickly stopping whenever Zuri came near. Something was wrong. She could feel it. By midday the gates opened again, but not in the usual way. This time it wasn't visitors. It was panic. A message arrived for Zuri indirectly through the staff. Stay inside her quarters. No questions. No movement. But fear does not obey instructions. When the first loud crash echoed from outside the mansion walls, Zuri stepped into the hallway. Voices rose in the distance. Footsteps rushed across marble floors. Guards moved quickly, weapons hidden beneath coats. And then she saw him. Unwoo Kang stood at the center of it all. No longer calm. No longer detached. His expression was sharp, focused, dangerous, but beneath it, something deeper was burning. Protection. He spotted her instantly. His eyes changed. Go back inside, he ordered immediately. Zuri didn't move. What's happening? He stepped closer, voice lower but urgent now. Not now. But she saw it in his posture. The tension. The controlled violence in the way he was holding himself together. This wasn't just business. This was threat. Suddenly, movement from the side, someone rushing too close. Everything happened fast. Unwoo moved first. Before Zuri could fully understand, he had pulled her behind him, shielding her completely. The force of his arm around her was firm, protective without hesitation. The threat was neutralized within seconds by his security. But Zuri didn't see that first. All she felt was his heartbeat. Fast. Real. Close. Are you hurt? He asked immediately, turning slightly but still keeping her behind him. No, she replied, still stunned. He exhaled sharply, but didn't let go of her arm. For a moment, the chaos around them faded into background noise. Only his voice remained. You shouldn't have come out, he said, quieter now. Not anger. Something closer to fear. Zuri looked at him. You were in danger. Pause. Then Unwoo spoke, barely above a whisper. I don't care about myself. That was the first time he said it. Clearly. Without hiding. His grip on her hand tightened slightly, not painful but real. I care about what happens to you, he added. The words hung between them like something irreversible. Zuri didn't speak. Because now she understood. This was no longer silence. This was truth trying to survive inside a man who had spent his entire life refusing it. The mansion was quiet again. But it was not the same kind of quiet that once ruled its halls. This silence was softer. Fragile. Like something had been broken and carefully placed back together without fully healing. That night Unwoo Kang did not call for meetings. He did not leave his study. And for the first time in a long time, he did not wear the weight of his world like armor. He simply stood by the window. Waiting. Zuri found him there. She didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. Something between them had already made silence familiar. The threat is gone, she said gently. Yes, he replied. A pause stretched between them. But neither of them moved away. Unwoo turned slightly, just enough for her to see his expression clearly. No mask. No control layered over emotion. Just him. And something heavier underneath. You shouldn't have stayed, he said quietly. Zuri stepped closer. I know. That answer made him still. For a long moment he said nothing. The kind of silence that used to separate them now felt different, like it was struggling not to collapse. Then he spoke again. Every time I get close to someone, they get hurt. Zuri's voice stayed steady. I'm still here. His gaze tightened slightly. That doesn't change what I am. She didn't look away. It changes what you choose to become. That hit harder than anything else. Unwoo exhaled slowly, like something inside him was finally giving up the fight. For the first time he didn't step back. Instead he asked quietly, almost like it cost him something to say it. Just one night, stay here. Not as staff. Not as someone working under me. Pause. His voice lowered further. Just as you. Zuri didn't answer immediately. Not because she didn't understand. But because she did. And what he was asking for wasn't just presence. It was trust without fear. Finally she nodded. I'll stay. Something in his expression softened, barely visible but real. Hours later they sat in the same room without distance between them for the first time. No orders. No rules. No walls made of authority. Just two people learning how to exist without pretending. At one point, Zuri leaned slightly closer. And Unwoo did not move away. Instead, he carefully reached for her hand. It was not rushed. It was not taken. It was offered. And accepted. They stayed like that, quiet, steady, real. Not as boss and maid. Not as fear and silence. But as two broken lives finally choosing not to run anymore. Outside, the world continued. Inside, something new began. Not loud. Not dramatic. But permanent.